Hey folks, hey Sharad, how's it going, man?
It's going well. I'm excited for another episode today, and again, broadly on the finance and lending side of things.
When were you not excited? Can I ask you?
Never. I'm always excited about finance.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely. We have looked at lending and fintech in general, but today I think will be a considerably differentiated conversation because we are speaking with Anshuman Panwar from Creditas, co-founder. Hey Anshuman, how are you?
Hi guys, nice to be on the show.
The pleasure is all ours. The reason why I said today will be appreciably different is because we've always had the conversation about lending, the credit environment, but we've never had the conversation about repayments and delinquencies. So that's the other end of the equation,
Yeah.
and I think you'll be able to throw much more light as a co-founder of Creditas. So no, welcome to the show. And we obviously I'm pretty sure we will head into fairly serious conversation pretty soon. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of your business and how things are going, and would love to hear a bit more about your journey, how you started, what was the initial problem statement that you saw before Creditas originated.
Absolutely. Again, it's a pleasure to be on the show with you guys. Insofar as genesis of the business is concerned, so we started about 7-8 years back in 2015, and I suppose is when we incorporated the company. So I started this company with my co-founder, Adan Srinivasan. Both of us, incidentally, before this, were working with a UK-based fund called Validor Capital, which was essentially investing in highly distressed consumer assets in the UK market. What that essentially means is we were debt purchasers. We will go to both high street banks such as Barclaycard, HSBC, etc., Lloyds TSB, as well as subprime lenders, and buy their defaulted retail portfolios. What that means is buy defaulted credit card portfolios, personal loan portfolios, auto loan, etc. Anything which is on the retail side, excluding mortgages. So we'll purchase them for pennies to the pound. Interesting business, and then you essentially look at either sort of doing a bit of a secondary sale or liquidating these assets in terms of getting these customers to pay, or even look at sort of securitizing these assets in some way, shape, or form. So we sort of did this for about 5-6 odd years, at the end of which both Madan and I got talking, and we said, hey, so to speak, I mean, the entrepreneurial bug, so to speak, bit us, and we said, hey, let's try to do something on our own as well. At which point we explored quite a few ideas. When I say explored, in the sense more on paper with few conversations with people, etc. And one of the ideas that we were looking at was obviously collections, because we've done this for about 5-6 odd years, and I think there were 2-3 major things that we looked at that seemed very, or at least enticed us towards it. First was that collections is an extremely huge market. It's just that it tends to be overlooked because it is extremely unsexy. But if you look at it, anytime you lend, there is going to be an NPA, and on retail side, those numbers are fairly sort of standard, anywhere between, let's say, 2 to 5%, right? And you sort of aggregate it over the entire market, so that's a pretty big sort of a market, so to speak of as such. Just that it happens to be that it is the sort of dark, seedy underbelly of lending, and rightly so, for a matter of fact. So that was sort of one. That's a huge market. The second aspect was for a business potential which is so high. It is a sort of business which has been very traditional, with very little sort of use of technology, right? So when you talk about fintechs or financial services as such, most of the sexy, glamorous stuff tends to be on the lending side, that I can better profile you and lend money to you, to bank customers, or sort of give you loans within 30 seconds, or buy now, pay later, etc. Collections is quite frankly an afterthought, and
Basically, you just named the suite of episodes on Transfin with most lending startups that we have had. Just kidding.
yeah, I'm sure it is the sexy part, right? It's something people understand. Collections, general, wisdom will be collections is about, left kneecap or right kneecap. Take your pick or
Yeah.
give me my money back.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that's pretty much how it has been to a large extent. So that's sort of the second aspect that we looked at it. There's very little in terms of technology. The only thing that has happened or evolved from a technology perspective has been that, when we started was that, okay, instead of going and saying that, we will send out field agents to collect money, that they said, okay, fine, let's start using call centers.
Yeah.
Right? It's more efficient, cost effective, and maybe some amount of CRM was being used, which is pretty much how collections runs even now.
Right.
Right. So that's the second sort of issue. The third big, I think, and this you can call is more of a genesis, or I would call it mission statement, but yeah, the gospel truth, so to speak, of collections, being that collections is not a problem of solving for morality. It's more of solving for friction. What I mean by that is most people approach collections as it's a morality sort of an issue that, the customer is not paying, that there is morally corrupt, etc., something or the other, and I need to sort of use the stick to get him on the right track, so to speak. Our experience and our belief genuinely is it's a friction problem more than anything else. There are various ways I can articulate it. I mean, you look at it, then on the collection side, you will essentially have guys, and let's use example of India, right? You will have guys at a 10,000, 15,000 rupee salary, essentially calling on customers or visiting them, knocking on their doors to collect money. There's very little empathy as such, whatsoever. That entire framework is just fraught with so many issues as such. It's an issue, right? At a meta level, essentially, as they say in India, if I owe the bank 1 crore, then it is my problem. If I owe the bank 100 crore, it's a bank's problem, right? And on retail side, essentially, what typically ends up happening is that if you look at a base of delinquent customers, there will be obviously willful defaulters, but you will see that circumstantial defaulters tend to overwhelm in terms of numbers. The guy who's a willful defaulter who took a loan with express interest to sort of not repay and run away with the money, you cannot do anything about it. Chase him, etc. But yeah, beyond the point, there's very little you'll be able to do. Also at a meta level, when any bank or any lender lends, there is a credit risk which is anyways priced in, right? So willful default in a sense is, banking, it's essentially about, good guys paying for bad guys, right? If you guys take a loan, you are repaying it, you're you're sort of trying to sort of pay for someone else who's going to do that. Right? So that's a sort of fundamental issue that you have to solve for friction as opposed to morality. And the way the industry is traditionally stuck, there is a lot of friction in there. So that's the third sort of major point that we looked at. We said, hey, this is a industry which is ripe for disruption simply because even if you have AI, ML, then all of those things end up going on the lending side and all these BNPL and stuff. Collections is obviously an afterthought. If I deal with it, then we deal with it. But it's a genuine issue in any conversations that we tend to have with potential clients. And you mentioned somewhere, new fintechs and all that sort of approach them or they approach us as well. There's something which comes out very clearly that there are issues there probably more so than with established players. That I think was the genesis. So about 7-8 years back, both I and Madan said, hey, let's start something. So we came back to India, set up the business, and sort of take you through a brief journey of the business as such, if it's okay. So when we started upfront, we met a few bankers, this, that, right, and we set up the business and we said, okay, let's go pitch to banks. Typically, guys in collections or this will give you some audience simply because they say, hey, okay, fine. These ITIM, ISB guys coming and doing something in collections. Have they gone off their rocker, so to speak? Have they lost it? But there is something Naya Mahalaya, so at least let's talk to them and figure out. And then they'll have a conversation, that's about it. Nothing much will happen. So we pretty much adopted what we call as an HOPO strategy, pretty much camped out of their offices, give us something to start with.
Right.
And they said, okay, let's figure out what is the worst we can give you. So they dug and dug, hit rock bottom and dug furthermore and gave us the worst of the accounts to work on.
Yeah.
And that's where we started about, I would say, 7 years back, 7-8 years old back. And it's been an interesting sort of journey over a period of time. From a business perspective, what a business is essentially is about that in collections, as far as possible, you can remove any human interface whatsoever, whether it be physical or voice, right? In terms of manual, sort of voice talking to you on a call, so from a call center or a field agent visiting you. Just remove that. If you can interact with the customer digitally, you will get the same results, if not better. As a matter of fact, you get better results. The idea about using technology and let's say this digital collections or what we now call as neo collections is essentially that, anytime you put human beings, there is obviously a inhibitor to scale that is sort of reached, right? An agent might visit maybe 5 houses in a day, a call center calling agent might make 100 calls a day, that's about it, right? Whereas with technology, you can reach out your entire portfolio or your entire base of delinquent customers or even live customers for that matter on a click of a button, and you can actually interact and have millions of interactions going on simultaneously and sort of go about converting these customers towards the payment. At a very meta level, that's the concept.
Right.
That's
happy to discuss.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, Anshuman. So a couple of things here, right? Just like as Nikhil was saying, sort of we've had so many lenders and underwriters who've come on, and they always say one thing is similar is that they have like perfected or a nearing perfection of underwriting so as to reduce their defaults and things like that, right? But obviously, it's never going to be fully accurate, and there'll always be. So just to get a sense of, I understand the scalability angle that you said that with one click of button you can reach, but at the end of the day, defaults, willing or there is an element of actually trying to get money which is yours, which either the person is not willing. So tech will help you in sort of reaching them and optimizing it. But how does that sort of convert into actually getting the money? Is it just overwhelming them with the sheer volume, volume of messages or volume of inbounds and sort of approach corner from all directions saying like, this is trying to sort of constantly go at it? Is it a brute force kind of a method, or is there some actual business tactful learning that's going on how to structure those conversations?
Absolutely good question. I'll come to that in a bit. But before that, you mentioned there are enough fintech players who are saying they've perfected their lending algorithms. So here's my view. If anyone says they have, then you should pretty much sell your house, put the money there, right? If anyone claims that they will have 0% default rate or NPA rate, I will simply say, okay, close all the banks anywhere in the world. You are the sort of god, right? That is just, it just doesn't happen. That was on a lighter note, right? It is pretty much as long as you lend, you will always have to deal with sort of repayments and collections and delinquencies. That just is the nature of the business. As much as we wish that we don't have to deal with it, that is the hard reality of business. Coming back to the question of how do we sort of solve for this. So in a sense, banks also send out messages, etc., but they're highly effective, right? So I will sort of maybe take a couple of minutes to run through how we go about this in a use case, and I will use a very, very simple use case, okay? And there are sort of various elements of complexity that can come in there, obviously. Over 7 years, we have obviously expanded it, learned a lot, and added a few more things there. But essentially what happens is it okay if I flip between Hindi and English?
Sure, absolutely.
It's fine.
That's fine, right? I hope from your audience. This will get edited anyways. Yeah, okay. So what happens is that, let's say I go to a bank, for example, bank A, they give me a portfolio of, let's say, 1,000 odd accounts. So the first thing that we do is with these 1,000 odd accounts is we'll typically look at, I will say, segmenting these customers. Okay, before that also there is a whole lot of background machine stuff that happens in terms of feeding the data. This problem with bank or any lender's data is there is a lot of erroneous data, there's a lot of non-usable data in there. You will suddenly come across 14-digit mobile numbers and nikhil.arora@garmail.com instead of Gmail. So they are all kind of typos, and also we sort of clean for that. And all of this cleaning happens essentially is very algorithmic, and it's a sort of system done.
Right.
Nobody manually sort of does it in any elections. People do it, but that's a that's like a 5-second job to be honest. Less than a 5-second job for 1,000 customers. It is some nanoseconds. The system does it. But after that, what happens is we do, let's say, for these 1,000 customers, there are segments which are created. These segments are more from a perspective of trying to understand who the customer is and what their need is, right? These are more of marketing segments and more than anything else. Let's just come to why we use them or why we use these segments. So, for example, I figure out that I have Nikhil and Sharad there. I figure out that, let's say, a Nikhil took a loan at the age of 25. He defaulted by 28, now he's 32, 33. I figure out that he's sort of somewhere got married and is probably looking for at that life stage, is probably looking for a home loan or whatever, right? So we will send out a SMS, and I'm just using a very, very simple example, an SMS to a Nikhil saying that, hey Nikhil, do you know, a poor credit score might impact your chances of buying that dream house or buying that dream car that you have always wanted, or that automobile or whatever, right, or a motorcycle. So we will send out a very simple, non-invasive communication, let's say SMS, and I'm just using very, very simple example right now. The idea being that so please click here to understand more. The idea being that it sort of somewhere evokes something from Nikhil that, hey, this is a need for me. Nikhil clicks on that link and he essentially lands on my webpage. Now, the interesting thing on the SMS is I'm not talking about either your delinquency or even telling Nikhil that, you know what, I know, for example, HDFC Bank gave me this account that you owe money to HDFC. You don't talk about that. The idea is not that you could land on a webpage. The minute Nikhil lands on the webpage, obviously technology by now is so sort of I think advanced that I figure out that this is Nikhil who has clicked on it, so I don't need to validate you. The idea being when you sort of land on a web page is when I show, hey, guess what, in our database it's showing that you have this particular delinquency of, let's say, 20,000 rupees with an HDFC bank, and this is how it is impacting your credit score. So if you want to get that new car or house, etc., then we will have to deal with this.
Right.
How this will change with the Sharad is that I, let's say, for example, figure out that Sharad, again, similar sort of a profile, again, let's say 32, I'm just putting that number out there, and I figure out in the past 7 years, he has sort of moved jobs, but within financial services sector, right? So I will send out a message, hey, Sharad, do you know a poor credit score will impact your chances of getting a job in financial services? And again, he will click on it, land there, they will give a method of educating him on the website. So the web page that the Sharad sees versus a web page that the Nikhil sees are two different web pages, two different journey. And over there I will talk about, hey, you know what, most banks or NBFCs or people in financial services do a credit check as part of their background, employment background verification check. So if you are looking for a job change, you might want to sort of deal with this, be clean with it, right? So there is a lot of personalization, and this personalization is not only limited to segmentation. That is where I think that this is something we built over 7 years. It's not just, okay, I figure out that this is segment, this is segment, this is SMS will work. You can send out an SMS and then, suddenly you get the customer on a web page which talks about something else altogether, right? So there has to be a logical, I will say, consistency and continuity in the customer journey and experience that this is what they're talking about. For example, if I send out a message to, again, Nikhil, today he doesn't respond. 2 days later, slightly different SMS goes. 2 days later, another SMS goes. And let's say I figure out Nikhil is from Delhi, so I'll send out an SMS in Hindi. Right, and he responds on that. So the minute he lands on my web page, it should not be in English, it should be in Hindi. So then the entire web page, web flow, everything will be in Hindi. So that's the idea, and this is more of, I think, getting the customer in. Once the customer comes in, then there's an aspect of educating that, hey, guess what, if you deal with this, this is the upside. If you don't deal with this, this is the downside. The choice is yours. Right? And then there is obviously an entire sort of settlement engine that is built in there, or a negotiation engine. I won't call it settlement. There are sort of aspects to it. It looks very easy that you can do it like this, but always remember that the money is owed to the lender, right? Then we sort of tie up with the lender. We have these deep integrations with all the banks and NBFCs, wherein we are saying that, hey, if you've given me this portfolio, the customer comes in, says that he owes me 1 lakh, but let's say he owes the bank 1 lakh, but he says I can only pay 50,000, then guess what? It should not be a process that on the web page we say, okay, hold on, let us get back to you. And we send out a mail to you guys, and then somewhere in the chain of command, somebody signs off on it, okay, 50,000 is okay or not okay. The true essence of sort of a purely digital sort of solution, as well as, I will say, digital journey. And the other aspect that I talked about is solving for friction, right? Is to do it right then and there. So we integrate with the banks. We have these sort of grids, so to speak, in terms of which customers can be settled at what amounts, etc. And so that all that negotiation happens on the fly, upfront. The second aspect of that is, let's say a Nikhil owes 1 lakh and says 50,000. Guess what? Even that 1 lakh is, generally typically what happens is that 1 lakh will have maybe 60,000 or 55,000 of, let's say, principal, and another 45,000 of interest and charges in there, right? So in the background, we've already sort of agreed with the banks that, hey, okay, fine. Anything less than 55,000 is a settlement. Anything above 55,000 is a closure of some, let's say, grade or some sort of heuristic that the bank gives us that, okay, so if Nikhil says 50, then I'll say, okay, this is perfectly fine, but you will be shown 50 is fine, but guess what? It will be marked as a settlement, and these are the sort of drawbacks or negatives of doing a settlement as such. So why don't you go and maybe pay 10,000 more, do 60,000, and be marked as closed, so that for future loans, etc., this will be completely closed. It's not a settled as such, right? So in effect, you paid the entire amount of which was owed to the bank in a sense. So I will say there are sort of two aspects to the business as such. One is a B2C sort of aspect, which has a lot of, three things: gamification, personalization, and an aspect of financial literacy in there. These three sort of aspects are there. The tougher and the bigger aspect is obviously the B2B side, sort of to convince the banks to do this and have all these integrations and stuff in place, so that you can actually effect a truly digital sort of process as opposed to have a lot of back-end.
Right. But I mean, it's very fascinating, and especially I really like the entire idea of having, predetermined thresholds and with the lender in terms of, locking a settlement there and then. But I mean, at the end of the day, specifically the use cases that you kind of walked us through, it's a kind of a soft persuasion which is built in the entire product, right? I mean, you're trying to educate the customer, you're trying to tell him transparently what are the pros and cons of your action, and then you're trying to bring them in. It's not like a brute force approach where, a guy shows up at the door, or, someone is placing a ad in the newspaper. I mean, that's a totally different conversation that around the ethicality of that, but lenders often do that, right? I mean, you see smaller ticket size guys, their faces are splashed on the local paper. In your view, when it comes to these soft persuasion methodologies, like you don't see much of a difference in terms of the success rate, right? Like you think that, and obviously you have 7 years of data behind you.
So I'll come to that as well. So a couple of things before I talk about that. So there is a soft and there's a bit of a hard also. Hard is, you will say, hey, guess what? You have not paid for 90 days. This account is now coming up for legal review by the bank.
Right.
So they might, put a case against you or some legal action against you
Right.
as well. So that is also part of it, but, it's not really hard. It's on a sort of web page or it's on a mobile sort of screen. I mean, you can't really shout at the screen, right? You can't really break the screen. Whereas if some person is talking to you, then, India, let's be honest, all kinds of NCBC and all kinds of flowery invectives and colorful language will be used. Here, there's nothing. It is what it is. It's very matter of actual. It is very, very sanitized in a sense. It is what it is.
Maybe uppercase letters at best.
Sorry?
Maybe uppercase letters at best in your...
Yeah, that's the maximum that you can do. Try to avoid that as well. But interestingly, you're talking about that. So over 7 years, again, going back to the journey, when we started, they will give us... Now, the beauty about sort of doing delinquency is, and I know that both of you guys are from financial services, so you will appreciate this. At least you will have an idea of risk. So typically what happens is that the guy is not paid for 1 day, right? There's a risk profile. And let's say the bank has, let's say, 10 lakh accounts, and let's assume somewhere I'm putting a number 50,000 don't pay on day one, which was the due date, right? That risk profile is very different from a customer or a bunch of customers who have not paid for 90 days, from a bunch of customers who have not paid for 180 days, from a bunch of customers who have not paid for 2 years, right? These are different profiles. Even from a liquidation perspective or a liquidation curve perspective, you will say, okay, the guy or the portfolio, which is, and this is pure math I'm talking about, in a sense, right, who is not paid for, let's say, 1 day, you will assume, okay, 80% will pay, somehow or the other. The guy is not paid for 90 days, you will say, okay, maybe 30% will pay. The guy is not paid for 180 days, that bunch of portfolio, maybe 5% will pay. The guy is not paid for 2 years, 30 basis bits will pay. The guy is not paid for 7-8 years, 1 or 2 bits will pay, right? We started, by the way, from that 7-year-old portfolio, wherein 3 or 5 bits was the sort of payment propensity, or let's say what the banks or the lenders will assume will happen. So what we have sort of been able to demonstrate, and it's a journey, right, in terms of sort of getting hold of accounts from banks, because when you type with banks, initially they will give you the worst of the lot, right? They will not risk the best of customers. So you have to perform there, overperform what the bank itself is doing, then you up the value chain and it will then further up, then further up. So what we have been able to demonstrate is essentially that using a new collections platform, we are able to essentially perform either at the same level or at better levels than what the bank itself is doing, using brute force, so to speak, getting better results at a lower cost. When I talk lower cost, I mean the cost of collections go down by almost 50-60%, right? Because you're not really putting people in there. The problem is that it's technology, and technology is expensive, and at scale it becomes extremely cheap. So yeah, that's where we are.
But like, I mean, you made a very interesting point of risk profile, right? I mean, does your approach soften as you go to worse customers, who have been delinquent for way longer, because there's like certain bit of sunk cost there?
No, the approach is same. See, essentially, the approach is same pretty much. It's not that you soften or harden as such. It's just that, different segments, you deal with them differently. There's an entire aspect of marketing. There's an aspect of financial literacy. There are some interesting sort of tools we run in terms of sort of, let's say, somewhere getting people who are paying to feel that, hey, taking pledges that I will be a better citizen of the country, etc. Which might be as cheesy as it is, but it works, right? So there are a lot of other things from just a marketing and dealing with customers perspective that tend to work. You might find extremely cheesy, but there are certain other things that work with different set of customers. A customer who's just not paid his overcharges and is not really delinquent, it's a different profile of customers. The treatment you give them, and within the same segment, the guy who has, let's say, only charges outstanding on a two-wheeler loan versus charges outstanding on a auto loan will be two different segments of
Right.
customers. How
Yeah.
do you deal with them? It's completely the kind of treatment you give them. And that's pretty much about it. It's more about, I would say, marketing, segmentation, how do you deal with them and executing it. See, mostly what you will see in business, everyone will say, lending and all that. Okay, we have these different segments and all. Our profiles one day, they're brilliant. I can also give that gyan and figure out. Where we differ is we actually execute it and sort of get results on it, which pretty much is borne out by the fact that we're pretty much there at all the top banks in the country, whether it's HDFC, Axis, ICICI, RBL, IndusInd, all the banks you name of Kotak. We are there with NBFCs, etc. Obviously, there's still early days. The market is huge, and we need to sort of obviously capture as much of it as possible. But yeah, I think last 2 years have been extremely interesting for us. We're going,
Yeah. Just one thing on the sort of business side. Like let's take the example of RBL. I mean, so you essentially probably they've shared the details or the contact details with the amount of the people who are sort of defaulting. So you have that access now. You have with zero amount spent on acquiring any potential customer. You've got a list of, let's say, guys who are failing to meet their payments, right? So you've got an access database now of, let's take RBL and again Kotak, of guys who are not servicing who are not unable to service their loans. Is that worth something to be cross-sold? I mean, obviously you can't underwrite. They're not potential. They're probably not the best people to lend. But is there some value in those data points to be to accumulate and cross-sell some kind of service?
Yes, there is. But I think at this point of time, from a business perspective, what we are looking at is a strategy, and I'll come to the cross-sell bit in a bit, is that we are looking at sort of deploying the platform at as many banks as possible. The beauty of the platform is the kind of results it's giving over the last 6 months, 9 months, right? It is sort of selling for itself. Banking, by its very nature, is an extremely incestuous industry, and collections more so, right? Collections, let's say AVP at bank A will max to max go to bank B, bank C, bank D, right? It's not certainly going to go into a consumer electronics sales business as such, right? So it's an incestuous industry, and when you sort of start performing at one bank, then pretty much by word of health, and you start getting the leads, etc. So that's a strategy. From a database perspective, I think there is a lot more. Coming back to the first point of that, so in a sense, we don't have to sort of chase customers out of the pool. That the bank says, "मेरे 1000 customer हैं, मुझे पता है, मैं तुम्हें नहीं बताऊंगा कौन है, क्या है, क्या है, तो तुम जाके पैसा देंगे, right? They will, as a matter of fact, give me everything that is there. Because I'm tasked to collecting money from them, so they will give me all the information. In terms of cross-sell, upsell, yes, there are opportunities, but the way we look at it is that if a bank, so let me give an example, right? You're talking about a lot of these fintech businesses who are saying we'll aggregate, lend, etc. Right? I am here saying that I will collect. So the difference being कि यार तुम 100 crore एक केस में जाके किसी भी चौराहे पे खड़े हो जाओ, जनता will do on you कि मेरे को लोन चाहिए, right? That's about it. And on the other hand, you go there, stand there, कि यार तुम customer को पैसे दो, it's a different proposition altogether. It's a part of the one. And the fact that we're solving for it, I think we can solve for the other side of it as well, in terms of lending to customers. But our business model will be there's a lot of cross-sell, upsell opportunity. A lot of these large lenders, and that's what pretty much everyone does. Banks, BFCs, anywhere in the world, credit unions would say, I have a captive base. I have sold them one. Maybe auto loan, can I upsell a BNPL, can I upsell a credit card, can I upsell a mortgage, this, that, right? And be the one-stop shop for any financial sort of needs for that customer. In a sense, what we've built is a customer engagement platform. So yes, once you have that database, the bank can go to sort of upsell, cross-sell. What we cannot do is sort of take that database and sell it to someone else as such. That is, I think, unethical to go about it that way. Conceptually, maybe another way to look at it is that banks have been have done a piss poor job of sort of digitization, no matter what you say, right? And that's why you see a lot of these fintech companies coming up, both in India as well as internationally, and doing really well at times, right? The good part is that they are able to sort of build that, digital interface with customers. We have a slightly different view of it. They're saying that, hey, I'm providing that entire digital infrastructure to the bank directly, right? And I'm charging some SaaS revenue on it. I mean, it's very neat and awesome SaaS revenue. Let's not go there, but yeah, I just found a sort of neat way of doing it as opposed to saying that, hey, I will start lending on my own or something like that. So yeah, there is cross sell, upsell. As a matter of fact, we are doing it with a couple of banks. Should go live. Hopefully, first week we should be live. So that opportunity is there. I think the bigger opportunity maybe at some point is once you have this sort of, I will say, basic forum of banks on the platform to get them to sort of share data amongst each other using us as a sort of platform.
Yeah.
Maybe on delinquency. So a customer, let's say Sharat, might have banking relations, let's say credit relations with an HDFC, an IC, and an Axis. Let's use this example. And he's paying his HDFC credit card on time. He's paying his ICICI home loan on time, but his Axis personal loan is beyond sort of 30, 60 days past due as such, right? So I can sort of have a lot of information flow between all three of them in real time. Axis might have an old number of Sharat, which might be updated to the other two banks. So a lot of that can happen, but all of that will, in a sense, require a CUG, is what it's called, a closed user group, and a consent of the bank,
Right.
Which I suspect will happen over a period of time. That's the way we see this evolving.
Right.
But those are other underlying layers that you build on top of your basic platform.
Right. No, that's it's very exciting. Directionally how you're thinking about things. I wanted to ask you, in terms of technology, where do you see, this evolve into? For instance, that like naturally, it's clear that in the last 7 years, you guys have used technology to, efficiently segment customers, have a very, very bespoke journeys for each profile, and, and the messaging gets tailored, and the distribution obviously gets automated, right? Now, there are, and obviously it's frictionless to the extent possible. Now, there are, we keep on hearing of newer and newer innovations in the collections realm also. Interestingly, only a few weeks back, we met an NBFC who were like, we do our internal collections and we only hire women call center operators because people are nicer to women. And the fact that there is like a human voice, but it's a woman who's speaking, and that apparently has some effect in terms of the success rate. Obviously, we don't know the data as such, but okay, keeping that at face value, even in terms of the realms of technology, you have things like automated voice and more human-like voice. There are speech AI algorithms which are out there, text to speech, and vice versa. Is the idea to also bring those additional levers at some point in time, or you think that there is enough meat? It's right now a question of just penetrating deeper and deeper with more and more banking institutions before adding those layers.
No, I will go with the former. So I think from that perspective, we have invested in technology. There are, we do explore automated voice. We use automated voice. Text to speech is also something that we have. So all these sort of technologies that we actively use. So what I gave you was a very simple example, right, of how we do business. But there are a lot of these things that we use ourselves. The question always comes down to, do you want to build a lot of things on your own, or do you want to ride on someone else's sort of solution for some of these things? For us, it's a mix. At times, for example, Android has a much better text-to-voice solution than why will I reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So some of these tech stacks we ride on, and some of these we build on our own as well. But from a technology perspective, these are things that we do. To be honest, that's the whole idea of sort of being in a tech business, that you sort of leverage as much technology as you can. So it is something that we do use.
Right. And, also on regulations, how do you view things? For instance, you specifically mentioned, a potential kind of a data sharing umbrella structure with multiple banks, when it comes to lending data, which kind of gives each other the opportunity to, cross sell or upsell, etc., etc. On the other end, on the regulatory end, we hear about, things like account aggregation platforms, which would anyways do that, and would actually provide banking institutions with data ranging from one's taxation to GST to lending, and kind of becomes an added technological layer for fintechs to work on. I mean, there's obviously a lot of lip service around these concepts, and a lot of them are fairly early
Absolutely.
stage.
Yeah. So on a data, is two things from a regulatory perspective. From a purely business perspective, our view is very, very simple. I think I mentioned three sort of pillars, but there's a fourth pillar in there as well, which is regulatory. Insofar as we are concerned, and the not experience as well. So regulatory wins are always one-sided and one-sided, which will be pro-consumer. So from a collections perspective, I genuinely believe a lot of these things in terms of using unfair practices, treating customers unfairly, etc., something that the regulator will clamp down, has clamped down, and will continue to clamp down and keep tightening the rules around sort of some of these practices. So that for us as a business is a pure, I will say, like a massive tailwind for us, right?
Right.
We are actually talking to banks, largest banks, etc., saying that hey, we want to sort of for certain portfolios completely do away with field collections whatsoever, right?
Right.
And do only digital and telecalling and sort of increase digital collections as such. So that is a plus side for us. Account aggregator and data side of business, to be very honest, the way my business is structured right now, it is one-on-one, right? So there is these are individual silos. If I work with a Kotak Bank,
Yeah.
then Kotak Bank data stays pretty much with Kotak Bank. There is very little in terms of moving across banks right now.
Right.
And even if you were to do it, it is something that you do with the CUG, etc. perspective. You get all these banks together and say we want to build that layer, but I don't think it's something which is an immediate necessity in the next 1 to 2 years kind of a thing, but it is something which will evolve with. The third aspect in terms of account aggregator, yes, you're right. There are a lot of companies which have this account aggregator license. I think now more of a very meta gyan to a lot of these companies say कि हमारे पास account aggregator, license is there, and to say we can do much better underwriting, this, that. But what we have seen in practice is not really true as such. A lot of this data tends to be very iffy as such. What we personally do have as such is, because it's in collections, we tie up with these account aggregators on my platform. So it's not that we tie up. We have these partnerships as well, but it's up to the bank whether they want to tie up or not tie up. So if I go to a bank with my platform, one of the features I enable on the platform is that they can ingest data from external sources, or the platform can ingest data from external sources, not just bank data. The bank has to just authorize that. So, for example, the bank might say, hey, I get a lot of bureau data, so you can take data from bureau directly. I authorize it. And that's how that pretty much works. So it's an account aggregator sort of, which is providing some tax information, even more than tax, I would say provident fund, all these kind of data points exist in the market. And, there are proper bona fide account aggregators who would sort of provide that information. Then I would sort of go to the bank. I think that what we are seeing, let's say I go to Bank B and say that, hey, guess what, Bank A sort of 3 months back tied up with this or enabled this particular feature on the platform, where they could access this data as well. And we saw a 2% or a 5% uplift, or whatever that number actually is, right? Are you interested? If the bank is interested, then they sort of pretty much sort of flip the switch and authorize it that they can get access to that information. Remember, we are not really on the Athera side saying that this data belongs to us and there is a map. I mean, we are not saying that. I think that other issues as such, and we are not even saying that. We don't intend to. I think there is enough money to be made by just doing a proper business on collection side as opposed to saying मेरे को data चाहिए data पे मैं किसी को insurance भी बेच दूंगा किसी को मैं चट्टियाँ भी बेच दूंगा बात हो जाए तो I think उसकी कोई end नहीं है and I think people were saying that end नहीं है right I think it is just about solving for one thing for us. It's a market which is I will say both horizontally deep as well as vertically deep, right? So it's a massive market. If you just stick to it, keep solving for it, a lot of these other things will keep happening on its own. I can predict what will happen in the future, but it is not something that will happen in 6 months, 2 years, 5, or let's say next 2 years as such. But yeah, for example, this cross-sell, upsell opportunity, we always used to talk about it, but we never actively went and said, yeah, मैं अगर monthly collect कर सकता हूँ digitally, तो imagine करो मैं cross-sell upsell में कितना तुम्हारे को awesome results ला सकता हूँ,
right.
And it just has happened sort of on its own. It has evolved organically, which is fine. Remember, we are sort of extremely strapped as a company. We are not massively funded as such, so it has been more of sort of sticking to basic business principles and making the right choices. That doesn't mean that you don't make wrong choices. We have made wrong choices, but hopefully, as in life, so in business, you hopefully make more right choices than wrong choices.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's all about the net positive. Anshuman, this was, usually the flip side of speaking with founders is that when we are talking about business environment or regulations or the market, generally most people give a very, very rose tinted kind of a version of things. So it's a breath of fresh air to hear, a more pragmatic point of view with a bit of cynicism. That's something we also appreciate a lot.
Being on sell side, I think we love the cynicism. So, but it was a fun chat. So thank you for taking the time out. Almost, we've gone a little over, but this was highly entertaining and obviously quite interesting to learn about the business and what you're trying to solve. And I think we also feel there's a deep market opportunity here. So fully appreciate your time, Anshuman. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. It was my pleasure. Really enjoyed speaking with you both.
No, absolutely, Anshuman. This was a great pleasure. And so this is Nikhil Arora.
This is Sharat Tupran
signing off.